Okay, so we are doing a trust funding workshop. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Krista Hermance. I'm an estate planning attorney with Hermance Law. And if I haven't met you before, thank you so much for joining me in this trust funding workshop. I'm going to be going through I'm definitely going to go less than an hour. I will try to get through it as quickly as possible. But I just want to make sure that you get all the information of why it's so important to fund your trust and the different types of assets since you have your estate plan in place. So if you haven't been to our office in a while, as you're watching this in the recording, or maybe you're one of our older clients, these are our wonderful attorneys that we have working at our firm. Our office is very family oriented in just that we have a very flexible working environment for our team and making sure that they can service our clients as well as be parents for their kids. We also have offices all over. So Ventura is our main location where most of our staff is located. But we do have offices in Santa Clarita, Westlake Village, Irvine, Calabasas, Pasadena, and we can service clients virtually throughout the state of California. Okay, so what is trust funding? So the idea is that when you have this revocable living trust that you've created, you need to fund your trust. Okay, so what is it? Well, funding your trust means transferring ownership of your assets to your trust or naming the trust as a beneficiary or contingent beneficiary on some of your assets. So it depends on what type of asset is dependent upon what's going to happen for it. And it's really a matter of going through every single asset that you have, account, and we're going to go through all of those to really go through and make sure, have you updated the documentation properly? Do you have the beneficiary designation? Have you moved it in the trust if you need to? So when you think about trust funding, the best analogy that you can have is when you have this trust, you are filling this bucket, okay, right? Think of your trust as this bucket, and you need to put your stuff into your bucket. And when you have money, right, those assets, whether it's investment accounts, you need to put those into your trust. Checking account, put those into your trust. If you own a home, okay, and I don't mean that you have a mortgage on the home or that you own it outright. It doesn't matter, whichever one that is that if you have your name on a piece of real property, that home should be in the name of your trust. So putting it in your bucket. And here, from your perspective, you are going to be putting stuff in and out of your trust throughout your lifetime, right? And just moving assets in, moving assets out, because you as the trustee have the flexibility and control to be able to do that. So you're going to continue to acquire assets throughout your life. You're going to sell stuff, and you can do all of that as the trustee of your trust. So why does trust funding matter? Well, there's things that could happen if your trust isn't funded properly. I'm not sure what happened with my slide here, so I apologize for that. But trust funding is the first step in trust administration. So a properly funded trust, meaning you're filling your trust bucket, it is really what you should be striving for. Because when somebody passes away and they have a trust, the first thing that the person who's going to administer your trust, your trustee, is they're going to look to what's in the trust. And so it makes it easier for that person, your successor trustee, you might know it as an executor, that can just come in and be able to start looking at the trust terms, figuring out what needs to be done, and then having those assets in the trust. It will also provide that successor trustee with a preliminary list of accounts, property, anything that's listed in the trust. It's going to be listed in your trust on your schedules, or it's going to be in your trust binder because you're going to have your trust portfolio. It's going to have documentation in there as to what accounts you have. So it's basically just giving your successor trustee the ability to come in with this roadmap to know exactly what you have. One of the saddest things I see when I have clients that come in where somebody's passed away and they don't have any estate planning stuff done. They have no documentation in order. And then I have families coming to me saying that they are spending just hours going through their deceased relative's house, searching for papers, right? Trying to find accounts, trying to find life insurance, retirement accounts, all of these important papers that are just everywhere. And so this is a really great opportunity for you to get organized, right? To make sure that now that you have this estate plan done, one, it's funded, but now you also have this or all of the stuff organized in the assets that you have. Okay. If you have a trust that is not funded properly, meaning that your assets aren't in the name of the trust, right? If there's accounts that are left out, if there's, investment accounts or things like that, there may need to be some type of probate proceeding. And so a lot of times when we're going through the estate planning process, we talk about this as the pour over will, kind of being there as the backup. And yes, that would be something that would potentially happen with the pour over will, but it still has to go into this smaller probate proceeding that does cost money, and it would then pour over into the trust. But that could be prevented by making sure that the assets are funded into your trust. Another way to think about it is when you have a trust where you have all of these instructions that, if something were to happen to you, this is how the money's to be distributed. If there's no assets in your trust, there's nothing to distribute. So there's nothing for the trustee to be able to follow. And so that's why it's so important to make sure that your assets are in your trust, either in it or pointed to it, to make sure that the trustee can follow your instructions to distribute according to your wishes. Okay. So the trust funding process. So what do you do for trust funding? Well, the first thing is you want to make a list of all of the accounts and property that you have, right? Just this exhaustive list of, every single bank account, right? Even if it's a small bank account. And I see a lot of clients that have, tons of accounts at different banks. So if you're looking at downsizing, this might be an opportunity for you to look and see what banks you want to keep, but just at least getting all of those in writing. Because that is, again, one of the things I hear from people is they don't know all of the assets that are out there. Then you're going to want to review the documents to see how they are owned. Who is the beneficiary? So like if you have a life insurance policy, going and pulling that declaration page, if you can do it online, if you need to call the company and have them mail it to you. A lot of them I have seen though that you can do this stuff online, which makes it really easy to update stuff. So you want to see who owns certain accounts, right? Whose name is listed on the account? How is it owned? Is it owned jointly? Is it a separate account? If it's a life insurance policy, who's listed as the beneficiaries, who's listed as the backups. And so as you're putting this list of accounts and property together, it's important to then identify, okay, well, how is it owned, right? Is it single? Is it jointly with somebody else? Who's the beneficiary if there is one? And we actually have a worksheet for you to be able to use, and I will show you where that is in a little bit, where it's an Excel spreadsheet. It makes it really easy for you to just, save a copy for yourself, and you can go in and start filling out your assets, right? To be able to track, is it getting funded into your trust? The other thing is that if you have accounts where maybe you don't have paperwork, sometimes I find that this happens if it's something that maybe you get like on a quarterly basis or like semi-annually or even annually, you might not get all of the paperwork all the time. So you want to contact those parties, those businesses, to be able to make sure that you get documentation that says who the owner is or who the beneficiaries are. Then you want to complete any paperwork that those businesses or whoever's holding the assets, if it's a financial institution, if it's a bank, life insurance, you want to make sure that you get whatever documentation is needed from them and complete that paperwork, okay, to make sure to get it either updated into the name of the trust or changing those beneficiaries. And then once you do that and you submit it, you want to get confirmation that it's actually been done. I have heard of companies just being so overwhelmed with the pandemic because they shortened their staff and they went to like with some very big life insurance companies. And like in the transition period, there were a lot of life insurance beneficiary forms that were submitted and nobody processed them. And I have heard people have passed away and they are not honoring it because they never got it and they never processed it. And so that's why it's important to make sure that when you submit these paperwork, changing these beneficiary designations or changing over the accounts, that you have confirmation that it shows, yes, it's in the name of the trust, or yes, this is the beneficiary designation. Okay. Okay. So what should be funded into your trust? Okay. So when I say funded into your trust, I mean, this is where you have the name of your trust. So it's you as the trustee of your trust is the general term. It should be on the certificate of your trust. I'll show you an example of one later. If you don't have our trust funding toolkit, it is available online. You can get it from our client Google Drive. And there are instructions in there about different naming conventions on how to name things. But different things that need to be funded into your trust, meaning that the trust name should be the account holder, right? Which is you as the successor trustee, I'm sorry, you as the trustee of your trust. So bank accounts. So this is going to be checking accounts, savings accounts. If you have any type of brokerage or investment accounts, stocks, bonds, if you have personal effects and the value over about $5,000 for something, it's important to include a description of that item on the schedule at the back of your trust. And I'll talk more about that soon. Real estate. This is one of the biggest assets that you're probably going to own. And it's important that you make sure that it's funded properly into your trust. The biggest thing I can say with funding is that everybody's situation is very different. And so it's not all that this is the way that it should be, right? It depends on if you're married, what your age is, who your beneficiaries are, what their ages are, if there's other family dynamics going on. And so that's why you need to consider, what do I need to do and make sure that it's funded. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you're looking at changing the beneficiary designations for, let's say, a life insurance policy, you have the choice, right? If you're married, you can either list your spouse as your primary and then list your trust as the backup. Okay. Or you can list the trust as the primary and your spouse as the backup. So this is where I'm saying it's, you need to decide between your family what works best for you and your family situation. Okay, so let's talk about real property, because again, I feel like that is one of the really big important ones. And if you have any questions, I'm going to try and get to all of the questions at the end. I do want to get through this to make sure that I can try and be mindful of everybody's time. Okay, so funding real property into your trust. So this is if you own a home, a condo, you own some type of real property. Is it owned potentially as separate property? Are you single and you own this house? Is it jointly owned? It could either be that you're married and you jointly own it, it's husband and wife is community property, or you own it with like a sibling or a partner, right? So there's all different types of ways to own it. Maybe you own it in an LLC. So the biggest thing is making sure that your trust is funded with your house, and you should have in your trust binder the deed that shows that it was transferred from you to your trust, if that is something that we provided for you. Sometimes people do it on their own, or there's other things involved, but it's important that you have the last recorded deed shows that it's from you to your trust. And that means it's funded into your trust. It needs to be in the name of the trust. Refinancing a home is what we have seen in such a substantial increase in refinances, that people's houses are getting unintentionally moved out of their trust for the refinance, and it never gets put back in. And so if you recently have gone through a refinance after doing your trust, it is important that you contact your lender or the mortgage broker, or title company, whoever you're working with, and find out, did they move it And if they did they put it back? And if they didn't, can they please? Okay. Because that is where I see issues with people, that they don't even know that it happened, right? They're going through all the paperwork, they're signing everything. It is very confusing. In refinances, I see stuff all the time where people that, once owned it together, now for a refinance, somebody else can get a better interest rate without the other person. And so now that person isn't even on title anymore. And it's kept like that, right? So it needs to be in the name of the trust. So that is the most important thing when it comes to your house, is making sure that it is in the name of your trust. If you find that maybe you bought a new home and for whatever reason you didn't put it into your trust, because remember, now that you have this trust, if you go to buy a new house, all you have to do is tell your lender or broker and say, I have a trust, please put our house into our trust. And you provide the certificate of trust, and that's all they need to put it in your name, in the name of your trust. Okay. But if something happened and it's not, you can always contact us, and it's something that we can do for you, right? And is moving the house into the trust. Okay. Same thing if you buy a property out of state. You have this trust here, you want to make sure that it gets put into your trust. You should have either an attorney there. If you don't, contact us. We can work with an attorney in the state to do that for you. When you own multiple properties, right? The out-of-state ones, I have some clients that, own in 4 different states, but it's all pointing back to their California trust. Because one thing people don't consider is that, the trust is for California. That's where your primary residence is. And you might have properties in different states. But if you don't have it in the trust, every property that you have could potentially have to go through its own probate in every single state that it's in to be able to be distributed according to your wishes. Okay. And so that's why it's important that if it's in your trust, it makes it easier for the successor trustee to be able to manage it on your behalf. Okay. One other really important thing is that you need to, if you do own a home, is you need to add the trust as an additional insured on your homeowner's insurance policy. Not your car insurance, not at all, just your homeowner's insurance. Okay. And so it just makes it very clear that your trust is covered from a homeowner's insurance policy. Okay. Other things that you should consider funding into your trust. And again, this goes back to the family dynamics, the situation, and understanding, what works best for you. Life insurance policies. Again, depending on how you want to list it, if you have a spouse, you want the spouse to be first, then you want the trust as the backup, or vice versa. Retirement accounts. This is a really kind of touchy one, just depending on how the trust is drafted. And it's also dependent on if you have minor children. So, a lot of times we have clients that if they have minor children, they would list their spouse as the primary beneficiary and then list the trust as the backup, because they wouldn't want that money going to the minor children. If you have adult beneficiaries, so maybe adult kids, then, if from a tax perspective, it may be better to list the adult children as the backup beneficiaries or the beneficiaries, again, depending on your situation, because there may be better tax effects when it comes to distributing it directly to somebody upon your passing, rather than going into the trust to be held for minor kids. But it's all about protecting it, right? Protecting that money if you do have minor children. And then when your kids are older, then you can change it, and then it goes directly to them. Another one to consider is timeshares. And so this one is really, really dependent upon what you want. You should contact the timeshare company that you work with or that you own with and just say, I have a trust. What's the process? And they all have their own process on how they do it. They're going to charge you some amount of money to be able to transfer it into your trust. But the idea is to think about is, do you really want your timeshare in your trust, right? If something were to happen to you and you put it into your trust, or it's in your trust, well, then your trust is responsible for paying those yearly maintenance fees. And do you want that going to, like, if you have minor kids, would you want that burden going to the trustee to pay if your minor kids can't use it? So it's something to kind of think about, is maybe you just leave it out of the trust, but maybe, you paid a lot of money for it and you want to absolutely transfer it, put it in your trust. So again, something for you to decide. If you have a business interest, so an LLC, corporation, something, if we completed the business assignment for you, then it would have transferred, it would have assigned your interest to your trust. If you get a business in the future, depending on if you're working with a business attorney, or you had it created, you can always come back to us and we can do a business interest for you. Okay, so what should not be funded into your trust? Well, vehicles, right? We don't want you to put your automobiles, boats, RVs, motorhomes, any of those toys that you might have, because you're going to go through your life with lots of different types of these vehicles and these toys and things like that. From a DMV perspective, surprisingly, it's pretty easy when somebody passes away to transfer title. One of the other things to consider is that if you went to the DMV and you transfer title, then you have to put your insurance, your car insurance on the trust. And then if there's a car accident and the other party sees that, your trust is the owner, they might think that there's a lot of money, right? From a lawsuit perspective. And so, keeping it in your individual name is the way to go with these, right? Do not put your vehicles in your trust. Okay. So what tools do you need to fund your trust? Well, your funding instructions, it should have been provided to you. If not, again, it is on the, if you can't find it, it's on our client drive, with all of the instructions on how to fund your trust, like the different types of assets. And we go through all of them, right? It's very extensive and it's there for you. Any type of change in ownership form. So this could be, like at the bank, I will tell you the bank is one of the most challenging to do. But you only have to do it once, right? Once you get it put into the name of your trust, it's done. So you don't need to worry about it anymore. And generally you would need, if it's a joint trust, then it's going to be a joint account. You're going to need both of you to go to the bank and do it at the same time to get it moved in. Any beneficiary designation forms. So again, like life insurance, retirement accounts, any of those types of beneficiary changes. So beneficiary meaning, if somebody were to pass away, this is the beneficiary form, that would then you be able to update that. A certificate of trust. So that should be in your estate planning portfolio that you have. It's the 2 to 3 page document. I'll show you the cover page for one here in just a moment. That is the document that you will use to show proof of your trust, right? To financial institutions, if you're buying a new house, if you're refinancing, to show proof of your trust, you use that certificate of trust, because remember, your trust is private. You do not need to share it with anybody. And so the certificate of trust is what is used in place of having to show your entire trust. I will tell you that I have heard of certain financial institutions, generally when it comes to refinancing, wanting to see your entire trust. And I don't agree with it. I don't think that they need to see all of it. But that is their policy. And so, it's up to you if you want to share it with them or find somebody else to work with. Because what do they need to see? It's a revocable trust, right? You can make changes to it at any point in your life. The other thing is the deeds, right? So like the grant deed for transferring title for your house. So from you to the trustee of your trust. And if we did it for you, it should be in your estate planning binder or portfolio to make sure that your recorded deed is in there for you. One thing that's really important when it comes to checking accounts that I just want to kind of make a comment about is you don't have to change all of your beneficiary. You don't have to change all of your checking accounts, all of your savings accounts. But the idea is that you want to make it easy that if something happened to you, that I call them your VIPs, right? Your agents who would step in to do things on your behalf if something were to happen to you. If you do not have a checking account in the name of the trust, but you maybe updated the checking account so that it was a pay on death benefit. Okay. So most bank accounts that I know of, you can update savings accounts, checking accounts, that if something were to happen, this is who would receive the money in that account on your passing. The problem with that is that if you did that with all of your accounts, right? You're like, oh, I have beneficiaries on all of them. I don't need to worry about it. But if you were hurt and in the hospital, you weren't dead, which means that nobody would get access to that money to pay your medical bills or to pay for nursing care or to do anything for you. And if you're sick and you don't have capacity, you can't go to the bank. And so if you look at the checking accounts that you have and maybe, choose one that has the most amount of money in it, you want to make sure that that is in the name of the trust so that your successor trustee can go to the bank. They can pay your bills. They can keep the lights on. They can pay for nursing care. They can pay your medical bills. Any of that stuff that needs to be done, somebody has access to those bank accounts. Because a lot of times what I see is families have somebody that's sick. They can't access them until they die. And then if it's not in the trust, there's no beneficiary designation, they have to wait 45 days to be able to and then go try and get the money out of the account if they're an heir. It's not something that a lot of people think about. And if you have accounts, if you have a bunch of accounts that have a lot of money in them, they should be in your trust, right? I'm talking about accounts that maybe, you have a few $100s in this one and maybe a couple $1,000s in this one, then you can do beneficiary the pay on death accounts, right? Do those beneficiary designations. That's not a problem. But keep in mind that any asset that is over $166,250, if it is not in your trust, then it has to go through probate. And again, we would use the pour over will to get it transferred into your trust, but that can be prevented by putting it into the name of the trust. And so it's not one account worth $166,250. It's a combined account. So if you had like one bank with a bunch of different accounts and it totaled over that, the bank would require it, right? We'd have to go to court and get it poured over into the trust. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at all of your assets to say, okay, from a checking account perspective, here's what I want to move. Maybe you have a joint checking account with you and your spouse, and then you and your spouse each have separate accounts. Then maybe you don't move the separate accounts into the trust, but you just have beneficiary designations for those ones. So long as there's money in the joint account that somebody would be able to access to pay any bills that need to get paid. Okay. Okay, so I mentioned the certificate of trust. So this is an example of what the certificate of trust looks like. This is the document again. It lists the exact name of the trust. If you need a shorter name, because I know that the trust name is long, you can look in the trust funding instructions, and I give you different examples in there of how to actually name the trust to kind of abbreviate the different lengths depending on what account it is. I know beneficiary designations on a lot of the online portals and systems will not they have a max character count, and our trust names are way too much for that. And so you definitely want to abbreviate it there. But it's important to make it so that it's very clear what trust it is. Okay. So this is a certificate of trust, at least the first page, that if anybody asks you for proof of the trust or the trust, you can provide this to them, right? This is all of the information they need. One thing that I want to make sure that I point out is if anybody asks you for the tax ID number for your trust, a revocable living trust is not going to have a separate tax ID number. It's not going to have an EIN number or a TIN number. That is only given to trust when somebody passes away, depending on what's being administered. And so while you have a revocable living trust, the tax ID number is your social security number. If it's a joint trust, it's either of the grantor's social security numbers. So you don't need a special EIN number. The thing with taxes too, from a tax perspective, there's no difference when it comes to filing your annual taxes, right? All of the stuff that you own is in your social security number. It's all your stuff. And so there's no separate estate taxes or anything that's due. It's just your personal tax returns that you have been filing. Okay. Okay. Some other considerations to consider when you're looking at funding your trust and all of the documentation that's in your estate planning portfolio is you have this general assignment. It's also sometimes we would refer to it as a personal property memorandum, a personal property assignment. And what this document does is it says that all of your stuff, like your personal items, tangible items, household goods, furnishings, clothing, wear, sports good, all of that stuff is in the name of your trust, right? So it's kind of this blanket, we're putting all of our stuff into our trust. And sometimes when we have to do that probate petition that I was talking about and using a pour over will, we use this general assignment to show proof that you had intended that those assets be in your trust, okay? In the back of your revocable living trust, just in the, like after your signature page, there are things on there called schedules. And let me just show you real quick what that looks like. So like this is an example of what the schedules for a married couple would look like. Is you have the Schedule C, which is the community property, and then you have Schedule G1 and G2, which is their separate property. And so a lot of times we have clients that come in, if they're married, everything's on the community property page and nothing is on the separate property, right? They don't have any separate property. Everything is in the community. It is important that throughout your life, you are updating these sheets, right? Making sure that if you have any assets, you buy a new home, you get a new account, you have a PO, I'm sorry, not a PO box, I can't remember the name of the box of the bank where you keep your safety deposit box. If you have a safety deposit box, it's important to put that on there. You know, any other types of accounts or anything that you have, just putting like reference to that account and then the last 4 digits. You don't have to list them out, because again, this is showing proof, one, to your successor trustee that you have these accounts so that they know that if they need to look for them, they know that they're in existence. And then 2, if something isn't properly funded into your trust, it shows proof to the court that you intended it to be into your trust. And again, that's that pour over function that I was talking about. In the Google client drive, which I will make sure that you get the link for, and I will show it here on the screen shortly. And then I will also make sure it's in any emails that are going out to you guys. I have blank ones in there for you, so that if at any point throughout your life, you can go in, you can print out this schedule and fill in whatever stuff you have, you know, so that you're always updating it with whatever assets you have at that time. I will tell you, if you see $10 cash, it is a symbolic $10. You do not need to go and tape a $10 bill into your trust. It's just showing that the intent that you intend it to be trusted. I'm sorry, intend it to be funded. So because your trust needs to be funded to be valid and to be in good standing. So make sure that if you need to, you have access to these schedules for you to be able to update them as you need to. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go back. So other considerations, the personal property memorandum. The personal property memorandum is a document. Let me show you just so you can kind of see what this one is right here. So this is an example of what it would look like in the trust. It is a place for you to put anything, any tangible assets that you have, like a family heirloom, a watch, surfboards, records, like something that you would want to give to somebody at your passing. So you put a description of the property there, and you put the name and address of the person that you would want to receive it, you date it, and you sign it. Okay. And then this is referred to in your trust that says that if you were to pass away, your trustee, your successor trustee, is to distribute according to your personal property memorandum first, right? So they're going to distribute these assets that are in here. In the client Google Drive, I do have more of these documents for you to be able to use if you need to. Okay, so you should have some that are given to you. If it's, you know, in your portfolio, on your USB drive, so that if you need to print out more, you absolutely can. And then you can just add them throughout the course of your life, right? You don't want to do that anymore, you destroy it. Okay. But you can update this as frequently as you need to. This is just you being able to do this as much as you want. You don't have to do it, but it's here for you if you want to. Okay. Let me go back to this one. Okay, so remembrance and services memorandum. So in your estate planning documents, I do have an updated one that's on our Google Drive. You might have an older version, which is absolutely still works. I updated it, I think in 2020. And so some of our older clients might have the older one. So you can use whatever one works best for you. I actually have both of them on the Google Drive because you might like one better than the other. But it's basically just, you know, what do you want? right? If you were to pass away, how do you want things to happen? Service perspective, where do you want your ashes to go? Do you want to, I mean, I have these conversations with clients all the time with different things. And, sometimes they have very specific things. And, I say, you need to make sure you write it down. Or sometimes they'll find something online and I'm like, great, print it out, put a copy of it with your estate planning document so that your successor trustee knows what you want, right? Because unless this is completed or unless you've had discussions with them, it makes it very hard for them to know what you would want. And so this is an opportunity for you to just go in whenever you want to and be able to update this document with what your wishes are. Okay. And again, this is available on the Google Drive, which is our client Google Drive. So this is our client Google Drive. You can write down that address. I'm sorry, it's not super easy to remember, but it is through Google. But this is what it looks like. So I'm adding stuff to it all the time, depending on, what I find that I think that would be helpful to clients to make sure that, it's making things easier. So this is what it looks like. Again, I will make sure that this link is somewhere that's easy for you to be able to get to. But in the Google Drive, you can see that there are some folders there. So like you see the blank estate planning forms, kids safeguard system that has the guardian wishes for guardians, the travel and medical documents for minor children. That's something that's kind of new. That's in there for clients if they have minor children to be able to have those documents available if they are traveling. And then the trust funding kit. So that has all the instructions on funding. We do have some clients that are VA survivors. And so there's a lot of information about making sure that the families that are VAs know what the benefits are. And so I have that in there. But just going to like the trust funding kit folder, you can see that there's this examples, trust funding assets, and then there's the trust funding assets and accounts. That is the document that I was talking about. That is the Excel spreadsheet that you can actually download a copy and be able to use it to keep track of your accounts as you move them from however they're owned now into your trust. You can literally use this Excel spreadsheet to help you track moving all of these accounts over, right? Making sure they're funded properly, making sure you update any beneficiary designations. And if anything, it's getting you really organized so that it's, quick access to all of your accounts. If something happened to you, your successor's trustee can step in and know what accounts you have. So it's important to just always be updating this as you continue to get more stuff. Next to that Excel spreadsheet is the trust funding kit process. And that is the most updated instructions that we have. I saw a question that came in about retirement accounts. So there were some changes that happened when it comes to retirement accounts and how stuff is distributed. So I would look at this trust funding kit because it's going to have more recent information pertaining to any changes that happened in what it was called the Secure Act, if any of you are familiar with it. And so look at that trust funding kit when it comes to all different types of assets, right? They're all mentioned in there. It has very specific instructions to make sure that you know how to do it. So if you don't have this most updated version with your plan, I would look at this one to see what information it has in there for you. Okay. Okay. Going back to the blank estate planning form. So if you, on the main Herman's Law client page, there was all of these kind of folders. So that first folder, it said blank estate planning forms. So this is where that if you have something that you need, right, you've used it or you've updated it, like the schedules, you need to make a change. That personal property memorandum is there. The remembrance and services is here. So these are all blank copies for you to be able to go and download or print out and put that information in there so you can update your estate plan. These are all here for you to be able to use throughout your life. Anytime that you need one of these documents, you can go here and be able to just download it to be able to use. Okay. Okay. So a few kind of final considerations when it comes to estate planning. Since you're done, you have all your stuff signed, you have everything, but it's not done. right? The funding is the biggest part. It's not easy. It takes time to do because it's following up with these companies and then figuring out how to do it. And then what needs to be done and then doing it and then making sure it's done, right? So all of these kind of steps. So some other kind of things to consider is when you have your estate planning documents, whether it's in a binder or a portfolio, or you have electronic documents, where are your estate planning documents stored? Where are they stored? Are they in a safe? Are they hiding somewhere in your house? Did you put them in a safety deposit box? It is important that wherever they are stored, that your VIPs, meaning your successor trustees, the people that would step in to be able to act on your behalf if something happened. And I'm not talking about like if you're married, if it's your spouse, because your spouse should know where the documents are. So make sure if you're married, your spouse knows where it is. But then your VIPs need to know where it is too, right? And it's not only that they need to know where it is, that they need to have access to it. Because if you put your estate planning binder or documents in a safe, keep them safe. I get that. But they need to have access to that safe. They need to know how to be able to get it. I've heard so many stories from people that, they had elderly parents. They thought they had all these documents done. They could never find them. And they were locked in a safety deposit box at the bank that they didn't even know existed until like years later, they find a record of this document saying there's a safety deposit box, right? So that's why it's so important to make sure that wherever you have these estate planning documents, that your emergency people know where to find it and how to access them, okay? So with your estate planning documents, you should have gotten an electronic version of your documents. Usually we provide you a USB drive, or if they were uploaded for you. So there's lots of different ways that you can get them. You want to make sure that you're storing your electronic documents somewhere safe. That is something that I am in the works with and trying to do for our practice and being able to provide that service for our clients. I'm still kind of testing out some different services that are out there. But there's lots of cloud-based providers that you can upload your documents to, right? But you want to make sure it's somewhere that you feel comfortable having them, but definitely utilizing that so that you have them somewhere safe. Because if you have your binder, which I'm not looking at you if this is you, and it's in your bag that you got your stuff with, and your USB drive is still in there, and it's sitting on a shelf somewhere and hasn't been opened since you got it, then you haven't done anything to protect those electronic documents, right? You need to take that USB drive out, put it in your computer and upload it somewhere safe, right? Put it on your computer, upload it to the cloud. A lot of times people ask me, should I email or share the documents with any of my family members? And, it's really up to you. You don't have to. If you want to, you absolutely can. I generally will advise against sending like the will and the trust, because those are things that you could update. And if you provide it to somebody and they have an old version, there might be some issues. But in the same sense, maybe these are people that are they're your emergency agents, right? From a healthcare perspective. So yeah, you want to provide them your advanced healthcare directive, your power of attorney, so that if something happened, they would have that documentation. Those are all decisions that you need to make and just, see what works best for you and what you're comfortable with. You want to make sure that you are reviewing your plan, right? Every 3 years, you can come to us, and we will review it at no additional cost to you to just say, this is what's going on with your plan, or this is what your plan says. Everybody's still good here. Okay. Things that you want to look out for is people that you have listed in your plan, or specific beneficiaries or specific distributions or things like that. Has anybody gotten married? Has anybody gotten divorced? Have you had more children? Has anybody gotten ill that you had as an agent or passed away? Has anybody moved? I see that a lot. So, I will say the number one thing that we update for clients is guardian nominations, right? They have different plans for guardians, and that is the number one thing that we update. And I'm not saying you have to wait for 3 years. That's absolutely not what I'm saying, is that we will review it with you every 3 years. But if yes, I need to make some changes and it's been a year, you need to contact us, right? And we can work with you to get any updates that you need to do. Let's see. If you are completely overwhelmed by this, because a lot of times, when clients do their estate planning process, they think, oh, no problem, we can absolutely handle the funding. That's not going to be an issue. And then some time goes by, the funding isn't done. And they say, you know what? Maybe you just need to do it for us. And so we are here to assist you, right? If you need us to do the beneficiary change forms, complete those for you, get them notarized. If you just need us to do all of the trust funding, we can absolutely do that for you. It's just a matter of what you need, right? Of what you need help with and what we can provide for you. Okay, so one thing I want to mention is, as we kind of talk about all of this stuff from a funding perspective and making sure your stuff is organized, is who is on your A team. So your A team, this is like the people that have your back from a financial perspective, right? Making sure that you're being taken care of. And so it's important to kind of consider this. I have a lot of people that kind of put this list together of important people or important professionals that if something were to happen, their agents can go to these people for help. And so people that make up your A team, we have attorneys, right? And so different types of attorneys, family law, criminal, business attorneys, real property attorneys. We work a lot with real property attorneys when it comes to real property, right? And making sure that houses are being named the right way. If there's some changes that happen with spouses or ex-spouses, or the way that joint ownership is held, or issues with refinancing. I just had this happen where we had to go to a real property attorney to follow title to see what happened, right? And then get it fixed. It's a lot easier to fix things when somebody is alive and well than waiting for somebody or just not taking care of it and then somebody passing away, because that's generally where there would need to be court intervention. And that's what we're trying to avoid by having this trust. So from a estate planning perspective, we have you covered, right? We do the planning side, as well as if you know of somebody that passes away and they need help from a trust administration perspective or a probate, those are things that we can assist with. Other types of professionals, so CPAs, right? Who's doing your taxes for you? Are they doing planning, right? Making sure that you're planning for when tax season comes up, making sure that you're getting all of the deductions and things that you should be getting. Financial advisors, this is a huge one, right? Making sure that you are building and saving and investing, and that money is working for you for when you retire, right? Or for things that you want to do. A life insurance agent, this is probably one of the most frequently referred thing that we do for clients, is connecting them with life insurance agents, because a lot of times clients will come in for us with estate planning, and we'll talk about their policy that they have, and they say, I've been thinking about getting some more, I'm not really sure. And so we can refer life insurance agents to you, people that we work with. I'm always really hesitant when it comes to life insurance agents. And so I want to make sure that clients are seeing, people that really understand what's necessary and is really looking out for their best interest. Mortgage brokers, right? If you are thinking about refinancing, we work with a lot of mortgage brokers very directly, especially when it comes to like trust administration. And so we know a lot of really great ones, especially with interest rates being the way they are. Refinancing is a really big thing. So we want to make sure that it's being done properly from putting it back in the trust perspective. And then realtors. We work with a lot, especially when it comes to probate. So if you are in need of any of these, it's important to build your A team, right? To have these people on your team that if you need anything from a professional perspective, they are there. So if you feel like your A team is lacking, right? If you need somebody to fill one of these roles, please reach out to us. We work with amazing professionals all over the state, and I would love to be able to help you find somebody to really make sure that your A team is spot on to help you. Okay. So next steps, go fund your trust, right? Start making a list of all of the assets that you have. Use that worksheet from the client Google Drive, and just start putting down all of the assets that you have. The best way to get started is just to get started. It's the hardest part. It's like estate planning, right? So many of you tell me like, oh, I've been putting this off for so many years, when my first child was born and that was 10 years ago. This is something else that can get put off, right? So you just do a little at a time. I find that clients, if they just kind of tackle a little bit at a time, it doesn't seem so overwhelming, but you just have to get started. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to save time for questions. I am getting close to my hour and I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this was informative for you and it gives you good information about how to fund your trust with the ideas of why it's so important and how to do it. But I'm going to open it up for questions. And while I wait for questions to come in, I have just a couple other things. I think. Okay, for anybody that is watching this, whether it's live or in the recording, if you didn't get something that you feel like is missing from your plan, I'm sorry, call our office or email our office and let us know, and we will try and figure out what you need, okay? Okay, so a question came in that has to deal with credit card debt when somebody passes away. Um, and is it a problem for your trustee? So it's not a problem for your trustee, but a credit card debt is a debt of the estate. And so the trustee would be required to pay that debt as part of the trust administration. I will say that one of the things that we do when there's trust administration and credit cards is we will generally try and reduce the actual amount that we're paying so that it's not the full value, right? Try and get a reduction on that. Okay, so I'm going to save a little bit more time for questions. If you have any other questions that are coming in, I'm going to think if there's anything else that I wanted to cover that I didn't get a chance to cover. And then also, if you have friends or families, coworkers is a really big one, right? You're talking about it at the water cooler, which I guess doesn't really happen anymore. But if you know of anybody that needs estate planning, we appreciate referrals. It means a lot to us. And we really do strive to make sure that our clients feel like part of our family and that they're taken care of. And so if you have anybody, please make sure to share who we are with them. And we would really appreciate it. Thank you for that. Okay, so yes, this is going to be recorded. So I recorded it from the beginning. It's actually going to be on the client Google Drive. And so you can access it at any point, right? My plan is to try and do this funding workshop once a year live to answer any questions. And so you can join me next year for it. But if you ever need to kind of go back to it or share it with somebody in your family that wasn't able to make it, absolutely, it's going to be recorded. You'll get the recording in an email to you, and then it will also be posted on our Google Drive. Okay. I'm going to save it just for a few more questions. I see a couple more coming in. One thing that we've recently started doing is testimonials for working for us. And so a lot of you have probably already provided a testimonial, whether it's on Google or on Facebook or Yelp, and we absolutely appreciate them. They are amazing to review. And to see so many wonderful comments. And I will tell you, we actually do share them. We have like a daily team meeting and we read them and, give cheers to anybody that's mentioned in them. And so it's really great to be able to see them. But one thing that we started doing that was new is video testimonials. So if you like being on video and you're not shy from that sense, we would love for you to do a video testimonial for us if you can. I will include the information on how to do that in the email that's going to go out to you guys. Or if you're watching this in the recording, please send us a message, info@hermanslaw.com, and we will send you the link to do that recording. Okay. Okay. A few more questions that are coming here. Where are the instructions for the abbreviated trust titles? So that is going to be in the trust funding instructions. If you don't have the trust funding kit, you can find it on the client Google Drive. And it's probably in one of like the first sections when it talks about funding the trust, as it gives the different abbreviated titles. Off the top of my head, I can try and give you a few just to kind of give you some ideas. But it could be like John Smith Trust, right? And then usually any form that I usually see has like a dated, and then you put the date that your trust was created. It could also be John Smith RLT, right? Revocable Living Trust. It could be John and Jane Smith Trust. So you don't necessarily have to have the successor trustees listed in there because your name is in the trust. If your name is in the trust, it can just be the name of your trust, right? So John and Jane Smith. So hopefully that'll kind of give you some abbreviations, because I know, like, from a banking perspective, you're not going to fit my whole trust name on my checking, on my little checks, right? It's just not going to happen. And so it's just, you can abbreviate it like that. And in the trust funding instructions, which are on the client Google Drive, there are those different abbreviations to be able to use. Okay. Okay. Again, if you have instructions from the old trust funding instructions, depending on when you became a client, there might be some differences when it comes to retirement accounts. And so make sure you're looking at the new trust funding, because there were some changes with the Secure Act that went into play about funding it into the trust. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have. I just want to say thank you again for joining me tonight. And if you do have any other questions, you need to update your plan, you need anything, please feel free to send us a message. And we will try and get it taken care of, get anything fixed that we need to, get anything done to make sure that it's taken care of for you. Oh, thank you. Just some thanks coming in. Very sweet. Appreciate that. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. And again, if you have any questions, you can always email us info@hermanslaw.com. Take care.